We should be really worried as a community and as individuals when the people responsible for these millions and millions in funding react to difficult questions the way we've seen those questions reacted to. What I am is the mayor of a town who has watched areas of our community devolve into chaos due to a policy failure around social services. No one is shaming an individual for having an addiction, and no one is shaming an individual for having a mental health crisis.
For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini here in Cobourg, Ontario at Town Hall, and I'm joined by the Mayor of Cobourg, Mayor Lucas Cleveland, and we're going to have a really kind of off-the-cuff chat, completely unscripted, about what is going on in the town of Cobourg. And there's so much, and I don't anticipate, unfortunately, that we'll get to everything, but I think that we'll be able to cover some really good ground and get some of the key kind of points and topics addressed. So first and foremost, Mayor Cleveland, of course, thank you for agreeing to this interview and being here to speak to a wider audience. We see so much division within the community, and I think that that's also in the more elected official space, whether it be town council, county, the upper tier municipality, the county council. As the mayor and as a leader, tasked with kind of unifying these segments, how do you move forward given such division within the broader town and community?
Well, I think, Tamara, I'm just writing down how to move forward. I think that's a great first question. I think more importantly, before we even get there, especially when we're talking about division, I think we have to maybe address the elephant in the room, which is why did I ask to do an interview with you? I think that's an important question because you've seen, I'm sure publicly, there's been quite the reaction. And I think it's important to set the record straight about why I even chose this before we talk about moving forward. And I think it's important to say that I don't agree with a lot of things Rebel News says. I don't necessarily agree with a lot of things Mr. Ezra Levant says, or even that you've said. But at our town hall meeting, I was really paying attention. I had my listening ears on. And what I heard at that town hall meeting was you asking some really important, some really difficult questions. As someone who for the last 2.5 years has asked some very important and difficult questions, it caught my interest. And I've done interviews with every other journalistic agency in Northumberland County. And while I might not support Rebel News, I support tough questions, I support transparency. And I wanted to make sure that you, who seems to be a person that's willing to ask those tough questions, have the opportunity to do that, because I want to have a frank discussion. So thank you for also stepping up and being willing to take this chance with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and your post on social media certainly stirred the proverbial pot, so to speak. And so that's always, again, more of an indication of the division that exists in the community. And so I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think it's right in your face. It's out there right on that one post. I mean, forget all the other things that are happening in the town. That one post in and of itself speaks to the level of division. And so
how do we move forward?
So as a leader and as that unifier position, how do you reconcile with that?
I've been very comfortably reconciled with it since my first step into political foray. Tamara, I'm one of the few politicians left in Ontario, if not the only, that still has their election campaign promises online and to be viewed. I haven't touched that since the day I was elected. I think it's really important because when people ask me, how do you do this, how do you do that? Well, I say I've learned a lot in the last 2.5 years, but what I was running to do is very open and transparent for the entire public to see. So when you say, how do you move forward? The same way I do every day, the same way I move forward when I was managing a multi-million-dollar oil and gas industry ring, the same way I move forward when I was trying to build a zero-waste grocery market in the town of Cobourg. The same way you do anything that's hard. You wake up every day with a positive attitude and you try and make a difference in your life in a positive way. And so I would say that over the last 2.5 years, we've seen a lot of change. Mm-hmm. And I would see change comes with it controversy. There is no change that comes easily. Even much needed change is very controversial and very difficult. And we can see that throughout history. And in no way am I comparing what Cobourg is going through to some of the major social movements of our time. But these are major movements across the last 100 years of our society. that needed to happen, and every time it did happen, there was always controversy. There was always screaming and yelling from the rooftops because people thought it was going to be this or going to be that. And at the end of the day, I know that I have a 4-year window. I have a very limited bandwidth in terms of being the mayor of a town of 22,000 people and only a councillor at the county of 84,000 people. And within that lane, I'm trying to make the best decisions that I can with the information I have available to me.
What's that change? What does that change look like for you? Especially, you're halfway through your tenure now. Maybe we'll get to what maybe the next election phase looks like for you. So I'd like to pause on that particularly. But what does that change? What change are you facilitating in the right here, right now?
Well, I guess I'd like to know maybe from you, what would you like to talk about? Because there are so many things that are changing in the community. We've seen change around sort of social service area. We've seen changes on development front. We've seen changes on even how we as a government in Cobourg handle our legislative responsibilities. We had a whole governance review, which a lot of the community maybe isn't 100% in favor of, but we decided as a council that maybe we should change the process up a little because we kept putting new people into the process but getting the same results. Well, if you're changing the input and the results are the same, maybe it's the actual process that's the issue. And so this council courageously took steps, and within the first 6 months we did a complete governance review. Massive change. So what I would say to sort of look at that, what front would you like to talk about that change in? Because I think that's where we have to sort of maybe narrow it down a little.
Of course, and perhaps we should start at the beginning, which is the expansion of shelter services from Transition House's original location at 10 Chapel Street into the building, of course, at 310 Division Street. And so as someone who initially voted in favor of that expansion and really did so knowing that there was businesses in that immediate vicinity that were already voicing concerns over that expansion of shelter services to 310, and really raising the alarm at the issues that Transition House has seen since they reopened as a low barrier shelter in 2018. So this is going back, several years now. Why did you vote in favor of that expansion, and how does your vote yes for that change in light of today?
I think it's a good thing to start out with admitting mistakes when you make them. And you asked earlier in the question very clearly, how do you move forward? Well, I told you I move forward by waking up and solving the problems directly in front of me the best way I can. And at that point, early on in my career, I knew that there was a problem, that we had a 3-bedroom house that was the entire epicenter of social services for an entire 2,000 square kilometers. That was a problem to me. And I saw a solution, which was a larger shelter coming forward with several rooms and multiple opportunities. And for me, that, with my innocence and the new job I had just taken, seemed like a relative solution. We're going from 3 bedrooms to 50 bedrooms. This is a positive thing. I was unaware that Transition House in its original form wasn't a low barrier shelter. I've done a lot of research since this time, Tamara, and I unequivocally and 100% will admit that that original vote was not the right vote. It's okay to make mistakes. When you're moving towards progress, you have to take opportunities and you have to learn. And you don't learn by standing around not taking chances and not making decisions. And at the time, when I had all of the information available to me at that moment, that seemed like the right decision. And so that's why I made that decision. I can very proudly say that since making that decision, I've learned that the failure in it, and I have fought day in and day out to rectify that decision through various opportunities, most recently at the July 18th meeting, where we've now raised the barrier to be the transitional housing that I think I always envisioned 310 to be. I think vulnerable individuals in our community who need help should always get that help. That's where that statement ends. Individuals who, for no fault of their own, are facing problems through homelessness, well, why aren't we providing shelter for them? I always say that Cobourg is the most generous community I've ever been to. It's why I chose to move here 8 years ago. And that hasn't changed at all. If anything, I see day in and day out that generosity. But what's changed to me is to see that there is within this community a certain element of individuals who bring forth a drug advocacy. who don't necessarily focus their intentions on housing and homelessness, but use it as a way to normalize drug use. Drug use that's very harmful to individuals. People who are in the throes of addiction, man, do I have empathy for them. Lost a lot of good friends to addiction. I worked 10 years in the oil and gas industry. And no one is saying that we shouldn't help them either. And I think that's really an important thing because a lot in this community are mischaracterizing everything. I think a lot of people in this community forget that in the first 8 months, I took a lead from Mayor Hankivsky of Port Hope. And together I fought alongside to get the very first funding for a nonprofit center for rehab. There's a bed now at the CCFA that's funded by the Northumberland County. And that was because I heard Mayor Hankivsky, who is a PhD in political science, she's taught at Harvard, she's taught at MIT, like she's lectured all over the world. And she came to me and she said, we need to set up an actual rehab program that's not nonprofit, but is actually a for-profit. And she showed me the stats of how for-profit rehab does a lot better. I told you, when I get told that we need to go solve a problem, that's when I get involved. I'm like, oh, I love solving problems. And so I have to give Mayor Hankivsky all the credit because this was her motivation. And she brought this to my attention, but beside her, we fought for that. And we now have a bed, and I believe it's just over $200,000 a year for a full-time bed now at the CCFA. And the reality is that we are starting to see people enter rehab. In fact, we know now that there are more people applying for that bed than there ever have been. And so I'm not against any one individual group. In fact, through my professional work at the Market and S'more and my years before I became mayor, I've worked very closely with a lot of individuals in our community who were homeless but are no longer, who had addictions and who do not anymore, or at least are managing them more effectively. And a lot of that's through the jobs that have been provided, through the opportunities that I've worked with, and different charities. So that's my personal life. But as mayor, I've actually been advocating nonstop for 2.5 years for these individuals who are suffering from homelessness, who are suffering from addiction, and who have mental health crisis. We need to do a better job. No one's ever said differently.
And doing a better job, I think, obviously includes bringing the provincial and federal governments to the table, because this is a multi-pronged, multifaceted issue that again requires that collaborative approach. And so working alongside, MPP David Piccini or MP Philip Lawrence, what have their responses looked like, and what does that upper level and highest level of collaboration look like thus far, and perhaps also moving forward?
I want to be very careful, and I'll be honest, Tamara. I have a great amount of respect for all people in the political field, because this isn't an easy job. As someone who's 2.5 years in, a lot of respect for the work everyone does, no matter what party you're in. If you step forward to public service, I have a newfound respect because of all the attacks, the bullying, and no one's playing a victim. I'm just saying, as someone who's new to this world, I can't imagine what it's like at their levels. But what I'll say both our MP and our MPP is that since day one, they've been willing to compromise, work, and deliver for our community in any way, shape, and form they can within their lanes. This goes with several individuals that I think is in this community that I've worked exceptionally well with, yet there's this nomenclature, there's this misnomer out there that for some reason I don't work well with others. Whether it's Chief Vandergraff, who I find one of the most easy to work with individuals in the community, to David Piccini, to Philip Lawrence, I find a level of professionalism, both at the provincial and federal level and with our CPS, that is very common for me. I worked in oil and gas. I worked with people who've served time. I've worked with people who maybe I do not agree with at all, but I was able to relate to them on a professional level and work out professionally our differences, because that's what professionals are expected to do. Professionals don't have to agree on anything, but if we can agree on 5% and work together on 5%, then why wouldn't we work together as professionals to improve that 5%? So I found both the provincial minister and both the federal representative very willing to do what they can. When it comes to funding, we're seeing locally, the province has been showing up. When 310 opened, $1 million showed up, right? So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritties of all of the help that has been given to us from both the province and the feds, but I'll say that $30 million in a single year in 2024 in grants, that's what the town of Cobourg received. $30 million in grants in just 1 year. I think Cobourg forgets that's more money than our annual budget. And yet we're given in grants by feds and province. Clearly we're doing something well. Clearly we're working well with other levels of government if they are acknowledging our grants and giving us that kind of money to move forward with our projects. I see professionals working together all the time, and I'm very happy to be part of that sort of inner circle of professionals.
As the province doubled homelessness funding, I believe that was in 2023. I could be mistaken on the year, but recently the province did double homelessness funding for Northumberland County. You know, in light of all the failures of 310 and the mistakes that you acknowledge, where's the money going?
I'm not here to speak about Northumberland County. I want to be very clear. I can't speak about Northumberland County. There's a warden's position for that. When you're going to talk about the money going to the county, you're getting into operational questions about where's this, where's that, and while I may be the chair of the finance, I am not in a position to speak for or against the county. I'm happy to share my personal experience working at the county with you, Tamara, but in terms of where'd the money go, well, those are questions for the warden and the comms team at the county, and I'm not about to get into a slanderous situation or a libel situation where I would ever besmirch the reputation of individuals at the county or of the warden. I can share that since I was elected 2.5 years ago, I have never worked in such a toxic work environment in my life. I mean, I have hundreds of hours of videos that can be publicly documented and reviewed. And in those documents, you'll find that one or two particular members of county council have said, shut up, multiple times to me. Well, this is behavior we wouldn't be accept of a grade 1 or 2 class. Yet we have elected officials screaming across the horseshoe to shut up because they don't like my line of questioning. Because they don't like that I'm asking difficult, awkward, and important questions. I don't believe in sacred cows. I never have. It was a real pain in the butt for a lot of my teachers growing up. But here we are at the county, and I just think that we need to be willing to have very difficult, poignant, and important questions when we are discussing hundreds of millions of dollars. And I think that we should be really worried as a community and as individuals when the people responsible for these millions and millions in funding react to difficult questions the way we've seen those questions reacted to. I mean, we don't have to get into the games that have been played or into the meetings that I was kept out of, or the convenient factor that the meeting I was kept out of was the very same meeting I assume they launched the legal challenge against Cobourg. I think our readers are going to read into the sort of the situation that I've engaged with at the county. But a lot of that's changed, Tamara, and I have to say that. You saw the July 18th meeting.
Yeah.
Big changes. And what I've noticed as of recently is that instead of having 1 or 2 members of the county council being willing to be compromising, collegial, and work together, we've seen a drastic shift across the table and an acceptance after our June 17th open town hall. And you know, the town hall being on the night before and then that massive council decision, that's a big deal. And I think what people are also negating is that at that June 18th meeting, the county council also terminated their integrity commissioner. And I think that's a big, big, important sort of asterisk that needs to be mentioned there. And we can just leave it at that.
And so at that, the June 18th county council meeting, there was the move to obviously close the warming and cooling section, basement section of 310 Division, and then a report will be coming to staff, I believe, on Wednesday for the redefining designation of low versus higher barrier and focusing efforts on those higher acuity needs individuals. Obviously, the report hasn't come yet. But can you speak on what you would like to see in terms of how that definition looks and what the focus is for 310 and their delivery?
I can't speak to the nuances of social services. And I want to be very clear, I'm not a social service expert. What I am is the mayor of a town who has watched areas of our community devolve into chaos due to a policy failure around social services. What I fought for was to see both a reimagining of how services are delivered, as well as a reimagined county. And now we'll park that over here. But when I talk about reimagining services, again, I believe that's up to the doctors, to the social workers, and to those whose job it is to redistribute millions and millions of tax dollars across different services. And I'll speak to this. As a business owner, we learn very early that you can't be all things to all people. And when I look at what struggle we're dealing with locally to retain doctors for families, just to get doctors to come out to Northumberland County so that our actual citizenry, all of us, can have family doctors. And the difficulty we are with just getting even a percentage of our local community into doctors, where we're going to go once or twice a year. I think that while we can all have idealistic views of the way the society should exist, I think we also have to have leaders that understand that there's a reality that we currently exist in. Mm-hmm. And while I would love to live in a community where every single individual who needs mental health assistance gets that, where every single person who's suffering from addiction has a treatment bed, I'm going to continue to work my entire opportunity while I have this to get in that direction. We also have to have an understanding that a region of 80,000 people spanning 2,000 square kilometers who are having trouble attracting doctors, just family doctors, may not be in a position to provide the kind of special detailed care that these individuals would need. And we can't keep promoting this idea that those in the depths of addiction can simply be put in a house and everything's going to get better from there. We're seeing what's happening in Peterborough. We've seen what's happened in communities on the West Coast where housing first has gone forward and then millions of dollars in housing has been destroyed. So again, this is outside of my professional experience. I saw what was happening wasn't working. I look forward to a report coming from social services, and it's not about low or high, it's about medium to high and where we find that line. And so I'm looking forward to asking again some hard questions to understand, once the report comes out, why the staff are making this recommendation. What's the advantage of this? Again, when I fundamentally believe that as the mayor, my job is to look at every decision, take all the available knowledge I have at that opportunity. If I don't have enough, to ask the questions I need to generate that knowledge base, and then to make the best decision in that moment without the ego or the arrogance to not admit when we make a mistake. Mm-hmm. As a directional driller on an oil rig, if I could get the answer right 55 to 60% of the time, I was one of the best in the patch. Well, this idea that we're going to be 100% right every time, for me, just doesn't land. And what we need to do is make constant progress in the right direction.
Going back to some of the other, we see what's going on in other communities in Peterborough. Certainly we can look their way. And also there's Belleville. And both are kind of similar vicinity from Cobourg. Now, the mayor of Belleville declared a state of emergency to address the drug crisis there. Mm-hmm. Why haven't you done something similar?
Well, Tamara, I don't think the crisis is to do with the addictions in our community. I think the crisis in our community has to do with the drug advocates.
How does the town approach those? I mean, those individuals were here protesting just last week. I
respect everyone's right to protest, Tamara.
Well, and after the onus was really put back onto you for the letter that you wrote, saying that Cobourg should be a hostile place for criminals. And
sorry, Tamara, I'm confused about that, because I don't know of any city in the world that doesn't want to make their town as hostile to criminals and criminal behavior.
Absolutely. If you just,
sorry, I
was
didn't
going
mean to
to
cut
frame
you off.
it.
My apologies.
But so the letter, and really what seems to me the advocates hung on to, was making Cobourg a hostile place for criminals, which, I mean, absolutely, I can get into my personal opinions. But then you saw that the tent ambush, and immediately it was capitalized on as though this was some sort of vigilantism that you are somehow responsible for. And then the police come out and say, no, these individuals were known to each other, and we can speculate all day long whether it was, open air drug use related and these sorts of things. So how do you address rumors like that you're, making Cobourg hostile to criminals somehow promotes vigilantism, when then you see people protesting? And I would say, in light of the police coming out and kind of clearing the air in that sense, really making a fool of that advocacy work?
I'm going to let you use your words the way you will. I'm going to use mine. I wouldn't say being a fool. What I would say is I've stood back and allowed people to have their opinions for 2.5 years, without question. You can say anything you want about me, to a degree. However, I have to be very careful here, Tamara, because I have engaged a legal firm to move forward with a defamation and libel suit regarding several members of a particular group. You can say that you don't like me. You can say I'm a terrible person. You can say a variety of things, and that's all happened. And I wouldn't say I'm okay with it. I think it comes with the job. If you're not upsetting someone, you're probably not doing much. But what I would say is that a line has been crossed. When certain members of this community connected a letter of factual stats that did not in any way, shape, or form suggest any vigilante behavior to an attack on an innocent person, that is the definition of libel. And so I'm going to allow my legal team to handle that situation and not really get into the specifics. But what I will say is that you have to have proof when you're going to accuse someone of committing a crime. Mm-hmm. And I think people have not realized that there is laws around libel and slander, and I think we should just leave it at that.
Sure.
But you asked how I'm going to deal with it. I got a thick skin, Tamara, and I'm okay with people saying terrible things. Just let's not cross that line.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Getting into that policing and kind of the division that was really seems to have come about between the mayor, the police chief Van de Graaf. How do you reconcile becoming a more unified front once again in light of kind of the efforts that police seem to have been making in the last few weeks in terms of arrests and their police work?
I think we got to start from the scratch, from the very beginning. Paul Van de Graaf, Chief Van de Graaf, is probably one of the most easy to work with, collegial and honorable men that I've had the chance of working with. Do Paul and I see eye to eye on issues? Of course not. Do Paul and I have very difficult and terse conversations occasionally? Yes, we do. Just to give you just an example, I was just sort of rereading a text message that him and I sent each other over the weekend. And I was sort of rereading it. And in rereading it, I kind of realized that in my messaging on a Friday afternoon, I maybe came across a little too cocky or a little too much. And then I read the response of the chief to me, and what I can say is without question, the chief is an incredibly diligent, honorable man who truly believes in what he's doing. I have so much respect. What I'll also say is that I don't envy the job he does. I would say that I grew up in a policing family. I have a lot of empathy for our police officers out there. And I feel really sad for some of our police officers because I've watched firsthand them be assaulted in the streets by individuals in our community. They've done the arrest. And while they're still filling out the paperwork and having ice on their face from being assaulted, the person who assaulted them walks by the police station because they're already out within 2 or 3 hours. And so I don't have a problem with our police. I think our police are doing an incredible job with what they're doing. And if you look at the articles, and in no way am I saying this has anything to do with the letter or the police, but since that breakfast with the chief, how many arrests have we seen? How many pushers of death have come off the street? How many arrests? And that's not because of it. They've always been doing this. And I'm glad to see that they're continuing the job they're doing. People ask, well, you don't direct the chief. Of course I don't. I've known that. I chose not to be on the police board so that I have no direction of chief, because I knew that him and I should be working together. Because as mayor and chief, we both have our lanes to be in. And when I say I have a respect for Paul's, he stays in his and he's asked me to stay in mine, and we do. And we work very well, but we don't agree on everything. And a lot came out of a breakfast that him and I went to. Mm-hmm. Well, did I demand? Of course I did. I can demand all I want. Doesn't mean the chief has to listen to me. And I demanded that that we needed to take this opportunity with Bill 6 and run with it. I'm not a police chief. That's okay to demand that, because my job is to represent the people of Cobourg, and what I was telling the chief is that the people of Cobourg are telling me this, so that's my job to tell him that. And the chief's job is to do what he has to do, and I trust that he knows his job, because that's why I have such respect for him. So this idea that just because him and I don't agree, that there's a division, is part of what I would say is the sensitivity and the ridiculousness right now that's in our community. Just to highlight that, like, we have one journalist who wrote a blog about the job the police chief's doing. Why did we need to have a board meeting about that? You look at here, I wrote a letter to the community, clearly from the mayor to the community, enough is enough. Why did we have to have a special council meeting about it? This is part of the problem, is that it's okay to say things. It's okay to believe things, and it's okay to have disagreements. In fact, that's healthy democracy, and that's a healthy society, Tamara. I wouldn't want to live in a society where the police chief and the mayor see eye to eye on everything. Just like I wouldn't want to work on a council where we're all yes people for one another. I think that's one of the problems when you talk about division. Society is always a little divided because we're all different people. I would say what's actually fostering this division is this polarity that certain individuals in our community have taken on, with the idea that you're either with us or you're against us. I can agree with someone, say, who ideologically I don't agree with normally, on 20%. And I'm very comfortable working hard with that person on the 20%, knowing that we can't talk about 80 other percent because maybe we don't agree. I'm finding now, especially amongst certain particular groups within this community, that if you even diverge on one issue, they are ready to throw you to the dogs.
I just wanted to really get to, given the increase and reported increase in crime in Cobourg, can you explain the rationale behind a proposed reduction in the police budget for 2026?
No one has proposed a reduction in the police budget. So my strong mayor power that came out, or the strong mayor edict, simply stated that the police come back with no more than, I believe, a 4% increase. That's not a reduction, that's an increase. Further, that direction provided that the board, should they choose, could leave up to the same amount of money onto the business union as they had before. We know about that concern. That was what I really appreciate the board doing. They've brought sort of their issues to the forefront, which is great, and through the MOU, we've all had that conversation. But I don't think this is the year we start unloading all of the tax off our business unit back onto our residents. I think we need to, as you've seen, have a great conversation as a community about how we're going to solve the financial situation we find ourselves in. And I think that's my hope, is that will become the election issue. We don't need to talk about social issues necessarily in Cobourg. We need to talk about financial. How are we going to pay for our roads? How are we going to make sure that our children aren't unfairly burdened because we didn't save enough in our reserves? How are we going to ensure that our community continues to grow in a healthy and appropriate way? So it isn't a decrease in the budget, it is not a massive increase. And I also like to point out that at the last two budget cycles, you can find again on public record, me questioning the board, both in my first year and my second year, are you sure you're asking for enough? Are you sure you're asking for enough? Because what I was doing at that time is seeing the OPP rises coming up around, and I was trying to understand why we weren't asking for a bigger raise in those years. After 2 years of saying they don't need any more, I think it's fair that I said, fair enough, here's the 4% and let's move forward with that. Again, that's just a recommendation. The board is a separate, and I look forward to seeing what they choose to do with their budget.
Okay, so then nothing there is set in stone, and there's going to be obviously some wiggle room and back and forth.
This is all part of the new budget process.
Speaking of the strong mayor powers, how do you balance and find that delicate kind of balance between what some would say, is acting like a dictator versus enacting your strong mayor powers?
I love it. I'm the only dictator who's never dictated anything. The reality is, Tamara, is the entire strong mayors is a misnomer. There's a reason why councils of only 5 didn't get them. The only difference between a strong mayor community and a non-strong mayor community at the end of the day is that within a strong mayor community now, my majority is 3/4. So what do I mean by that? In a 5 council person, 4 councillors and a mayor, the mayor only ever has to have 2 people agree with them in order to move something forward. Whereas in a 7-person council, it requires the mayor to have 3. Under strong mayor legislation, I still need to have 2 councillors always on board. There is nothing I can do as a strong mayor that my council can't veto or overturn with a 2/3 majority. This is the reality of strong mayor. And the other thing is I would like to put a bit of a bubble into some people, if you will, and I don't mean to, but there's no such thing as abdicating power of strong mayor. Everyone keeps talking about, well, I've abdicated power, I've given it over, so you used your strong mayor power to give it? Oh no, we're not using a strong mayor power of the budget. Well, then you've strong mayored that you're not changing the budget process, but it requires a strong mayor edict in order to maintain the same. The government of Ontario knew what they were doing when they gave over half the municipalities in Ontario strong mayor powers. And I think that's really important. You don't get to choose to have strong mayor powers. You just get to choose whether to use them or not. But they're always there. You cannot get rid of them, and they cannot be taken away. You as a mayor just choose not to use them. But you have to use them to choose not to.
Interesting. Now, so heading into the October 2026 election, are you going to be running for a second term?
Yes, Tamara, the drug advocates in this community have made that, unfortunately, something that I don't have an option to do. I believe full-heartedly that, and all hyperbole aside, that the next election for Cobourg is probably going to be the most important election in the coming years, in the future. We have an opportunity with billions of dollars, both at the federal and provincial level, to really protect the future of Cobourg, our reserves and our opportunities. And we can't move back on the progress we've made as a community. We can't go backwards. And we need to continue to stand up for the safety and protection of our community. The reality is the next election is going to be between 2 possibilities, and that's one I would say is order and law, and the other is criminality and chaos. And at the end of the day, this is the community I chose to raise my family in. Currently, I am responsible for 4 children under the age of 10 in my household, and I want to make sure that I can walk around this community safely and calmly, while also ensuring that we continue to be the most generous community in what I believe is Canada.
Expanding on that just ever so slightly, because I know we're quite over our original allotted time.
It's okay.
What would be your primary objectives in a second term?
To take advantage of the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to literally make Cobourg the greatest community in Ontario. I think that we have the perfect mix right now. We are in the right opportunity, there's the money that's available, there's the interest that's available, and we're seeing that we are the last area within an hour and a half of Toronto to develop in Ontario. People think that we shouldn't develop or we shouldn't. I don't think everyone understands the amount of billions and trillions of dollars that are behind things like this. And so the investment that's coming, no one mayor, no one county, no one provincial group is going to be able to prevent this kind of dollars. It's literally like a torrent of development, a torrent. And I'm not saying I want all of that. I'm saying it's coming whether you want it or you don't want it. And the reality is those that think they can build a high enough dam don't realize that the wave just takes it out. And the best you can do is make sure that you channel that force, that power, into the avenues that serve the majority. So if development's coming, let's make sure we have the roads, the schools, and the community centers to back that up. If development's coming, let's make sure we centralize it so we don't have another Mississauga sprawling across all of this gorgeous farmland. When I talked about a reimagined county, this is all part of that. And Tamara, that's the real goal, is that I'm looking forward to another term to see not only Cobourg do incredibly well, but to also look at a reimagined county, which could really cover either end, from re-looking at the lower tier municipalities to a re-look at the senior staff of the county. And there is a variety of sort of opportunities between those 2 extremes. And I'm looking forward to, in the next year and a half, and hopefully the next term, really reimagining Northumberland County to make sure that we are not only taking care of our most vulnerable better, but that we're also protecting our farmland and ensuring our farming communities are protected, and taking advantage of a once-in-a-generation opportunity where the feds and the province are spending billions on the communities that are doing the right things.
Anything that we didn't quite touch on that you'd like to get across?
I mean, I was hoping to talk maybe about the secret meeting, but at the end of the day, I think that might be for another time. I just wanted to sort of go over and make sure I covered everything, because there's a lot I wanted to cover with you
And the
tonight.
secret meeting, you mean when you left
When I left the meeting chambers. Because the reality is, I think that meeting was more about a particular member of council's political opportunism than it was about my letter. I think that that political opportunism rightfully blew up in that person's face. And I think it's important that the mayor of Cobourg is allowed to write a letter. And it's okay if some people don't agree with that letter. But it's not okay to call a meeting and then to try and do it in closed, which is why I walked out. I said, if the council wanted to have a conversation, I was ready to, just like have this conversation. I don't shy away from any conversations. It'd be pretty hypocritical if I expect others to answer my difficult questions, but I'm not willing to meet you and whomever else to answer their difficult questions. But moving forward, I think we will really need to ensure that as a voting public, that we really start looking into each and every candidate, including myself, and to look at not just the words we say, but also the things we do. And that we have to realize that being a leader is about doing what's right for the majority of residents. And it's not about doing what's right for your own personal little echo chamber of supporters. I'll wrap with this. Michael Jordan wrote a book, or was quoted in a book, and he talks about how one of the interviewers is interviewing Michael Jordan, says, how can you play at the Knicks stadium because like they're booing you so loud? And Jordan, straight face, goes, well, I don't hear them. And he goes, what do you mean? He's like, I also don't hear the cheers. And then the reporter goes, sorry, what? He goes, yeah, I go on the court, I plug my ears, and I play the game I can play for the time I have. Because if you don't hear this cheering, the boos don't matter. For the first few months in this job, there's a lot of booing, Tamara. Then there was a lot of cheering, and some of the people that were booing were cheering. And I'm not going to be always your favorite politician, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. I think that means I'm probably doing my job. But I keep my ears open because I do want to hear what's going on out there. But I don't let those who aren't playing the game necessarily dictate the rules of the game I'm playing. And people think that's arrogance, they think that might be cockiness. It's empathy, and it's an understanding. I don't tell doctors or I don't tell lawyers how to do their job because I have no idea what they're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And while I love the advice and I love the feedback and I want to hear from the constituents, that's why I have an open door policy, that's why I'm on social media. So I was door knocking this Saturday. And I guess the other thing I wanted to talk about was this letter I got. It's a pretty big letter. And I just think it sets a tone, if you will, for the reality versus maybe what gives social media. This was handed to me on Saturday by one of the individuals who currently is sleeping, I believe, in the park occasionally. Dear Mayor Lucas Cleveland, I want rehab. I was denied. Despite blank's advocacy, my inquiry with the Cobourg Police to attend CCFA is not being considered, as they will not consider me, and it's not due to me discharged early last August, but due to the influx of people trying to get their first time to get a secured spot at 310 once it's completed. They are not considering any second timers because all first timers need a first shot, and there are so many trying to get in. I won't go into the rest as it gives some personal details, but Tamara, I think the reality is that those in our streets who are suffering, those who are streets who want to get help, who understand the work I've done in my own personal life, know that when they can bring this to me because they know I actually want to help them. These individuals come to me because they know that the only way to get better is through treatment and rehab. And I'm all done placating pushers of death who continue to try and normalize drug use in our community. No one is shaming an individual for having an addiction, and no one is shaming an individual for having mental health crisis. But criminality and criminals need to be dealt with as such. And I look forward to the next year and a half advocating on the one side to make sure there are better treatments for our most vulnerable, and on the other hand, making sure those who break the law are held to account. Thank you for the time today.
Likewise, thanks so much for taking the time, and I hope it's one of many to come in the future.
I hope so too, Tamara. I really appreciate your professionalism.
Thank you. For Rebel News here in Cobourg, Ontario, I'm Tamara Ugolini. We have a special website dedicated to all of our coverage on the crime, the chaos, and the disorder plaguing Canadian cities, towns, and streets all across the country at fixourcities.com. You can sign our petition there and check out our previous reports and consider supporting our work if you're able to at fixourcities.com.